Today, we're going to build the ultimate 2014 Mac Mini. How are we going to do it? Well, with the help of today's sponsor, iDsonix, who sent over this sweet 512 gigabyte NVMe and this 1 terabyte SSD. We're going to install both into this aging Mac Mini. Finally, we'll use OpenCore Patcher to install Mac OS Sequoia. Let's get into it.
The first thing that we need to do is to get our OpenCore Legacy Patcher USB drive ready so that we can install Mac OS Sequoia on our new NVMe drive. We must do this prior to replacing the drive inside of our Mac. If you don't want to update your Mac to the latest OS, you can skip this portion. First, we'll head to the OpenCore website. You can see that our Mac is on the compatibility list. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click the link to download the Mac OS installer. Scroll down to the GitHub page and click on the OpenCore Patcher GUI app.zip and download the file. Open the OpenCore Patcher file. This will take a few moments to install. When the main window opens up, we're going to go to Create Mac OS Installer. At the next window, then click Download Mac OS Installer. Choose the version that you want to download. For us, this will be Mac OS Sequoia. Grab a cup of coffee or eat one of those cookies that your mom baked for you the other day. This is going to take a few minutes. After the installer downloads, the files will be validated, then extracted. Again, this will take a few moments. Once all of the files have been extracted, you'll be prompted to create a Mac OS installer. At this point, insert your 32 gigabyte or larger flash drive, and once it shows up on your desktop, click Yes. Note that any files that are on your USB drive will be erased. Depending on your flash drive speeds, this could take 30 plus minutes. For this particular install, it took about 40 minutes to complete. Once the files have been written to the flash drive, you'll be prompted to continue to install OpenCore to this disk. Click Yes. A build window will appear, and you'll be prompted again to install OpenCore. Click Yes. A second window will appear, asking you where to install OpenCore to. We want to install OpenCore to our USB disk. After selecting the disk, we'll be prompted to choose which volume. Select the EFI volume. After a moment, you'll be prompted to ignore or reboot. We've successfully created an OpenCore USB boot drive. We'll ignore and proceed with powering down our system. If there are any files that you need to back up or save from your old Mac's disk, now is the time to do that, since we'll be opening up this Mac to replace the mechanical disk inside.
All right, before we jump into disassembling our Mac Mini, we want to make sure that we've got all of our tools necessary. So one of these little black spudger pry bar pieces works really well for disconnecting the cables inside of this Mini. A Torx TR6 bit, which is going to help us remove the back cover and almost all of the Torx screws inside this Mac Mini. And then a Torx T8 bit to remove our screws from the hard disk caddy here. Another thing you don't want to forget is obviously the storage for your build. So iDsonix was kind enough to sponsor today's video with their i3000 series NVMe, speeds up to 3000 megabytes a second. And this is what we're going to install our OS on. It's going to allow us to boot quick and launch apps super quick. It's got a 5-year warranty. And then our bulk storage is iDsonix as well. It's a 1 terabyte SSD with a 3-year warranty and read speeds up to 560 megabytes per second. Last but not least, you're going to want to make sure that you've got your thumb drive ready so that once we install our new storage, we can pop this thing in and launch and load our new operating system. Let's get into our teardown. First things first, we're going to pop off the back cover of this Mini. It attaches via 3, and then right here you'll see our 3 corresponding screws, and then there's 3 shorter Torx screws as well. You're just going to want to remember where those 3 screws go when you put this Mac Mini back together. 1, 2, 3. And then be careful when you take this little shield off, because here's our Wi-Fi antenna and it's connected to our motherboard. So we just want to be gentle when we pull it back. You can see here's our wire here. Our next piece, while we disassemble this unit, I'm going to take off this small Torx here, set it aside, gently pop up this connector from the airport card. I'll set that aside for now. You're going to want to be super careful in here when you're disassembling this device. We've got a lot of really tiny small connectors, and on these Mac Minis what happens when they get a little bit older is these connectors get fragile, so you want to take really good care to not stress them too hard when you disassemble this unit. So our next stop here is going to be on the cooler. And if you're apprehensive about taking your Mac Mini apart, the iFixit website has some really great tutorials along with some really good photographs here of step-by-step removal of many of these parts for your Mini. Now that we've got our cooler out of the way, you can see some of the Mac Mini's motherboard. We've got our CPU just below this heat pipe. And then our next step here, we're going to remove this small screw, which connects our SATA cable to our SATA hard disk drive. While we're in here, pop this cable up as well. Then our last screw that we need to remove to pull this motherboard out of the unit is this one right here. And you'll see some kits online for 2 small little prongs that go in these holes to remove the Mac Mini motherboard. What I've found though is that if you take and kind of push right here with your thumbs nice and firmly, this whole motherboard assembly is going to slide out right out of the top. And then you want to be aware here, we've got a power cable that plugs into the back of the motherboard. Once we get a little bit of room and this motherboard kind of breaks free of its mounting, we'll disassemble the power cable as well. Now we've got it loose. Use our spudger here to start pulling back the power supply cable. Nice and gentle, we don't want to break anything. Let's slide this out. Just a quick look at our motherboard. The back side of it, we can set it aside for now. Oh, I almost forgot one last piece that we'll need to complete this. We've got a small NVMe carrier board that our NVMe will slide into that we will use to connect to the Mac Mini's motherboard. And links for that will be in the video description. With our Mac Mini back here again, our hard disk lies under here. This is our power supply. We need to remove the power supply from the body of the Mac Mini to be able to also remove our hard drive. We've got another 2 Torx screws. And to get the power supply out, it's kind of wonky. But right here, we have this. And then inside of there, well, it popped out already, is this little clip. But this little clip keeps this plug from moving. So the clip is housed right here. This Mac Mini's been opened before, so it pops out a little bit easier. But you want to first extract this clip, don't lose it. And then to remove the power supply, we need to turn this plug counterclockwise so that it releases. And then we can slide our power supply up and out. That's going to now allow us to remove our hard drive. You can see here our Mac Mini case is now completely empty. Here's our hard drive assembly. So our old spinning disk. Be cautious here. We've got a couple of cables still sticking out. These all are going to transfer over, so we'll use the SATA cable to attach to our SSD. So let's go ahead and swap them over. So we're going to switch bits here to our Torx number 8. We'll gently remove the hard drive, and we'll want to make sure that we slide that little SATA cable right through this little hole. Perfect. Be careful here, we've got a little adhesive portion that sticks it to the factory hard drive. So let's go ahead, remove our old slow spinning disk, pop in our much faster SATA SSD. Again, cautiously push our SATA cable connector through. Get our hard drive lined up in here, and then we'll insert those 4 Torx T8s. Just opposite of what we did to disassemble. All right, our hard disk is ready to go back in. Meanwhile, we'll get our NVMe drive all ready to set and go. And the cool part about this little carrier here is super cheap on Amazon. And what we do is we just slot in our NVMe. But first, what we'll do is release the set screw or the hold screw. Seat our NVMe. And snug it up real quick with our fingers, and then tighten it up all the way with the screwdriver. Perfect. So now our carrier is ready. There's a little adhesive strip here on the back, and what that does is when we get our Mac Mini back together, it's going to sit right about here or so and stick right onto the top of it, and this little connector under here is going to connect to our motherboard on the Mac Mini. So let's get it back together. We'll show you exactly what we mean. Our chassis is back. We'll switch bits again. And gently slide this carrier back in. Don't want to tear off any of your connectors or bend or break. Now our carrier is back in for the SSD. I'm going to reinstall our power supply. Gently slide in from the side. And if it hangs up on something or it's not going in easy, do not force it. You're going to break something, you're going to pull a wire out, something's not sitting right. It should slide together nice and easy. And then what we'll do next is we'll get our power supply back together. So we'll reseat this. Kind of tricky. So we've got it straight in there. And then we can't forget this little tiny little metal clip as well. Again, goes right at the bottom of this. Just kind of locks it into place. Keeps it from rotating when it's all back together. So clip goes in right there. Time for us to slide our motherboard back in. We've got our motherboard assembly here. And that NVMe carrier board is going to plug right into this connector right there. Grab our board. Gently, oh, actually, we can't put our board in yet. Why don't you guys say something? We got to put some screws in first. I know somebody out there was like, hey, this dummy just forgot to put in screws. That's fair. All right, now we can put our motherboard back in. Get it lined up. Get our power supply connector connected. There we go. Nice and gentle. Power supply is connected. Slide in the motherboard all the way. Wiggle it from the back end while you slide it forward. All right, so now you can see we're flush again here. We're going to go back down and start connecting up some of our cables. Connected the IR sensor here for the front panel. Our SATA cable for our new SSD. Make sure our adhesive strip is set, and this little connector is going to slide and pop right in here. Trying to make sure I get it lined up properly so it doesn't just adhere and I'm out of luck. Perfect. We're all seated. Excellent. I'll finish the rest of the assembly here. Just about done. Our little Mac is going to be so much snappier with this flash storage. Just about done. Let's reconnect our Wi-Fi antenna. All set. Hard part's over. Next part is software. All right, for first boot, what we want to do is ensure we've got our thumb drive inserted, and then we're going to hold the option key when we power up. Perfect. All right, you'll see that we have two options on the screen to boot from. And what we want to do is we're not going to install macOS Sequoia because if we launch the installer, it's going to tell us that it's not compatible with this Mac. We want an EFI boot. Next menu here, install macOS. All right, now we're at our installation screen. Head over to Disk Utility. So let's format our media. All right, now we can install. Perfect. All right, we can see our drives here. We've got our 1 terabyte bulk storage and our second NVMe. That's the one that we're going to use to install our OS on. All right, this is the point at the video, well, and if you're following along at home, to grab a cup of coffee and eat some of those cookies that your mommy baked for you. Installing macOS onto your Mini will take about 30-ish minutes with multiple reboots. Let the install process do its thing until you get to the Set Up Your Mac screen. I'll fast forward here through the setup process and then into the desktop experience. After setting up your account, you'll be taken to the desktop. After a minute or two, the OpenCore post-install window will be presented. This is our last step to finalize the install. Click OK on the post-install OpenCore dialog box. A build window will appear, and then you'll be prompted to install OpenCore to your disk. This time around, we're going to install it to our NVMe or system disk drive. We do this so that we don't need the USB disk to boot into macOS. Click Install to Disk, then select your NVMe or system disk, then choose the EFI partition. OpenCore will install and prompt you to reboot. You can now remove your OpenCore USB installer that you made, as we no longer need this, then reboot your machine. So how does the Ultimate Mac Mini work after our upgrades? After all, it's only a dual-core i5 from Intel's Haswell generation. Well, let's look at the disk marks here. Replacing our mechanical spinning disk with an iDsonix NVMe gave us almost a 660% increase in read speeds, from 76 megabytes per second to 578 megabytes per second. Write speeds increased almost 1200%, 1189%, from 52 megabytes a second to 667 megabytes per second. Absolutely massive differences we experienced here. You might be thinking, hey, I thought that this NVMe had speeds up to 3000 megabytes per second. It totally does, but the Mac Mini doesn't take full advantage of the PCIe Gen 3x4. We'll never ever see those full NVMe speeds. For our iDsonix SATA drive, we're getting read speeds exactly on the money at about 560 megabytes per second. Write speeds are excellent as well at 417 megabytes per second. Overall usage-wise, this Mac isn't a screamer, so don't expect to load up some 4K footage in Final Cut Pro and edit away. However, performance is snappy enough for browsing the internet, watching YouTube at 1080, and editing some simple Office documents feels fine in LibreOffice. Any sort of browsing Facebook, watching videos, or Office productivity is perfect for this little Mac Mini. I was even able to get the most recent snapshot of Minecraft up and running through the official launcher. Performance in Minecraft was surprisingly acceptable, with frame rates varying between 35 to 60 with fancy graphics enabled. Things that work well on this Mac Mini are Apple's default applications like iMessage, Calendar, Notes, and Photos. One piece that I couldn't get working though was iPhone mirroring. Whatever I tried, I just couldn't get my iPhone to mirror with macOS Sequoia. Other things that work great though were the bulk storage that we added to this Mac Mini. It's perfect for somebody who has large files to install, maybe setting up a time machine or a network share on your personal home network so that you can share files in between computers. You can see here in this example, we've got some great write speeds from the desktop to our bulk storage. Thanks iDsonix for sponsoring today's video. And if you're curious what else you can do with an aging Mac Mini, check out my video linked above.